Good morning and welcome to this week's episode of Iconic Freedom, The Formula. Here we set a standard for accountability and responsibility, the ownership of your choices and your outcomes and everything that follows. Let each care for self and all will be cared for. So when I talk about the formula, we talk about that periodic chart that you see on the various websites that this is posted on, where you create those elements that come together and bring harmony to your life. And if one of those elements in your life is not working, then you extract it and you reevaluate it and, again, bring that harmony to your life. So last week, we explored capability. We observed that every dependency transfers to authority. And we discovered that the capability is our increasing reliability in responding effectively to reality. So today, I want to explore something that exists before the decision, before the choice, and before every response. And it's the title of today's episode, The Story We Tell Ourselves. And I want to clarify something, that stories aren't the problem. Human beings make sense of the world through stories. That's part of the human experience. The problem, I think the challenge begins when we mistake our story for reality. So if you think about that for a moment, something happens, a conversation, a look, a text message, someone doesn't return your phone call, immediately something begins filling the blanks. It's not observation, but interpretation. And we begin constructing a story that explains what we've observed. Sometimes that story turns out to be accurate. Most of the times it doesn't. The challenge is that our minds become attached to the story before we gathered enough information to know what's accurate. And when you do this, you attach your details, and you're often unwilling to change your mind once decided on said details. Attachment to the story, attachment to the outcome. Now, one of the principles I've discussed before on the podcast and in the book and in the subsequent updated book that is now on my website is the scientific method. It's so important. Observation, information, hypothesis, testing, conclusion. You notice the order? Observation comes first. Conclusion comes last. And yet, many of us unknowingly, or sometimes knowingly, reverse the process. We observe something, we immediately create a story, and we reach a conclusion. Then we spend our time looking for evidence to support the story we've already decided is true. That's confirmation. That's not observation. And I think one of the most important questions I've learned to ask myself isn't, why did this happen? We don't use why questions, correct? Because why is an opportunity to lie. So why did this happen? It's much simpler than that. What did I actually observe? Not what I assumed, what I felt, what I concluded. What did I actually observe? Because observation and interpretation are not the same thing. And separating those two things has changed my life. Here's another question that has become equally valuable to me. What story did I tell myself about what I observed? Notice what happens. Now we're no longer defending the story. We're observing the story, like watching a movie without attaching our emotions or, to what we observe. That's a completely different position. The story itself becomes observable, basically, scientifically, forensically, facts, evidence, none of which require emotion or interpretation. There's another fascinating aspect to this. Sometimes something doesn't seem consistent. Notice the language. I didn't say, it didn't feel right. I said, it didn't seem consistent. Now, you might think that that is nitpicking, but that's an observation. It's recognizing that something doesn't appear to fit the pattern that I've observed before. There's a tremendous difference between saying, I have a bad feeling, and saying, something about this doesn't appear consistent. One begins with emotion, which means you're out of reality. The other begins with observation, which means you're in reality. Notice how all these things connect, right? So over time, I've come to appreciate something remarkable about this, that the organism that is us recognizes patterns long before conscious thought organizes them into language, feeds them to the brain, and out your mouth they come. So think about an experienced firefighter, a pilot, or a doctor, a surgeon, mechanic, a parent. Sometimes they recognize that something is different before they can explain exactly what it is. Now, for a long time, people often call that intuition. They still do. But I think there's something else that may be happening. I think years of honest observation have developed increasingly accurate pattern recognition. Conscious thought simply hasn't organized those observations into words yet. That isn't mystical. It's recognition. It's observation. I think that language matters more often than we realize. The words we repeatedly use become the structure through which we observe reality, or we attempt to observe reality. Instead of asking, is this fair? Maybe you ask, is this consistent? Consistency can be observed. Fairness is an interpretation found in emotion. Instead of saying, I feel like they're lying, you might ask, what behavior have I observed that appears inconsistent? Again, observation before interpretation. Because I think the stories that we tell ourselves often serve a purpose. Sometimes they protect us, sometimes they justify us, sometimes they comfort us, sometimes they excuse us. And if you notice, I'm not saying those things are good or bad, right or wrong. You have to decide that. But I'm less interested in asking why, because it's opportunity to lie. I'm more interested in asking, for what reason did this story become attractive? That I needed to make it up, because every story attempts to solve something. And understanding that purpose for trying to solve it will tell us far more about defending the story than we could ever realize. I think as we become increasingly honest observers, something interesting begins to happen. We become less attached to our explanations, and we're much more curious about reality. Bring on reality. Show me more reality. That shift will change everything. The way you filter the world, and suddenly that game of solitaire on your computer, when you turn over the correct card for you, it all falls into place. Because reality doesn't need our agreement. Reality is not asking or waiting for our permission. It simply continues according to its nature. The opportunity isn't to create reality. The opportunity is to recognize it. So I think maybe this week's question isn't, what story am I living? I think maybe the question is, what did I actually observe, and what story did I tell myself about what I observed? instead of allowing it just to unfold? That simple question has the power to separate evidence from interpretation. And when that happens, wow, new choices become available. So again, I just want to say the story isn't the problem. Mistaking the story for reality is. Write that down. Mistaking the story for reality is the problem. It's the challenge you will face. Observation creates clarity. Clarity informs decision. Decision creates choice. Reality responds. And I think that every honest observation gives us another opportunity to align ourselves with what is true, what is accurate, what is actual reality. And once again, I don't share in order to change people. I share because I enjoy sharing what I've observed. Whether it becomes useful belongs to you, not to me. Okay, so hit that like button if you would. Hey, share it with your family and friends. You never know how it might support them in their own path and endeavor. The link to my new website is below, along with links to my books, including my new release, The Christmas Cookie. It's a collection of heartwarming stories that remind us how the smallest moments often reveal the greatest truth and leave the greatest impact. All the fun links are below, and if you're inclined, feel free to subscribe on Buzzsprout. I am on X, Truth Social, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Rumble. I don't think I missed any. And until next time, stay sharp, stay sovereign, and remember, reality isn't waiting for your permission. It never has. It never will. Reality doesn't care what choice you make. It responds to the choice you make. The question has never been whether reality will conform to us. The question has always been, will we align ourselves with reality? And as always, let each care for self, and all will be cared for.